Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for BEDA's 2015 Weight Stigma Awareness Week presentation. We are happy to be, or honored to be, working with Kathy Cater today on our Children and Weight-Based Bullying Day. Kathy has been part of the BEDA family for many years, presenting at conferences, helping with resourcing, identifying opportunities for advocacy work, all in the name of preventing weight stigma, specifically to children, and she is an expert in this field, so we are really, really thrilled to have her with us. We will be speaking with her for about an hour today. And here's a little bit of background on Kathy, just so you know what to look for in her presentation and all the goodies that you'll walk away with. Kathy Cater is an internationally respected psychotherapist, author, and consultant who has specialized in treatment and prevention of body image, eating, fitness, and weight-related concerns for over 35 years. Frustrated that progress in understanding these problems has not been matched by effective prevention, she developed the Healthy Bodies, Teaching Kids What They Need to Know curriculum, published by the National Eating Disorder Association in 1998 and fully updated in 2005 and 2012. This comprehensive, evidence-based, universal lesson plan challenges the harmful assumptions of weight bias and stigma, promotes health instead of size, and aims to inspire kids and adults to stay connected to, care for, and take care of their diverse-sized bodies from the inside out. Kathy is a dynamic speaker whose presentations always earn her the highest praise from professional to lay audiences alike. And I am here to testify that that is 100% the truth. Whenever I'm with Kathy, I read something that Kathy's written, or I hear Kathy speak, I am immensely more informed than I was prior to the event. So thank you, Kathy, for sharing your time with us. We are all looking forward to your presentation, Transforming Stigmatizing Approaches to Weight in Children. And with that, I'm going to give you the screen and ask you to make sure that you are using the show screen mechanism so that we can see your PowerPoint as well as watch you doing a great job.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for that nice introduction, and hello to everyone out there. Thank you for tuning in to hear about this important topic. I think it is an important topic, and I hope that you agree with that. Also, thanks to BEDA, of course, for sponsoring Weight Stigma Awareness Week, and to Elizabeth for working so hard to make my tape possible, as well as a lot of all the other resources and tapes and webinars and articles that are going to be on the BEDA website this week. So I have a lot I want to cover, and we'll go for about 55 minutes. And but before I get started, I just want to take a minute to say something that may be obvious to some of you, but maybe not so obvious to others. And I just think it's really important to mention. And that is that, you know, if we want to transform a stigmatizing approach to anything, it doesn't matter what it is, we have to really first be willing to stop and examine our own beliefs and biases about the target of the stigma. So you may or may not be aware that research really shows that most people, including most healthcare professionals, health educators, a lot of parents, excuse me, and even those who work really closely with fat people, have a lot of bias about fat people. Here I am right early in the presentation needing to take a drink of water. I have something in my throat, excuse me. So what this really means is that for most people, before we even really began the work of talking with others about weight, whether it's professionally or in our personal lives or as educators, you know, it's really essential to first investigate our own associations to people of size and diverse sizes. And that includes our own bodies. how we feel about that and the biases. Because lots of people that I talk to say, oh, I don't have any biases in regard to other people. I don't make any judgments about other people in terms of their size and shape. But then when they start talking about their own body image and their own experience of their own fatness, you begin to hear that they may not be aware of how deep that bias runs. So, you know, recognizing our biases is not something to be embarrassed about or ashamed about. We're all very good students of our culture. You know, we work hard to learn what we're taught. And so this area is no different than any other. But if we want to avoid perpetuating the harmful effects of weight stigma, we have to really begin to be aware of that in ourselves. It doesn't mean we have to have fully worked it through, but to be able to see it and understand it and know where it came from, and also to be able to understand the harmful effects that it has. So, so this is just something that I want to put out there. We need to take a look inside, see what we've been taught, realize that this is just something we've been taught. It doesn't make it so, and that it's often faulty, and that it can be very harmful. So this is very important, I think, in thinking about helping to transform our approach with the next generation. Now, the other thing, just briefly, that I want to mention is kind of the flip side of that, and I think that this is something that a lot of people haven't really thought that much about yet, and that is that if we ourselves are not the target of a particular bias, so for example, I'm not the target of stigma about the size and shape of my body. Instead, you know, I'm the beneficiary, if you will, of thin privilege. So if we're not the target of bias, then it's really important, I think, that we begin to see that the positive assumptions that are given to us, whether we want them or not, there they are, that's really the underbelly of weight stigma. So this is just something that I think is important for us to be aware of, that these two things are inextricably bound together, and we can't really understand weight stigma without, and what it is, what's needed really to transform it, without also understanding the flip side of that, which is thin privilege. So with that, I'm going to switch over to my slides. And Elizabeth, have I got my slide up there in full form at this point? Well, she's not there, so I'm going to assume that. Okay, so I'm going to assume that I do, and so let me know if my slides are moving along. Okay, I think they should from now on in. So this is just weight bias, and you know, so I'm just saying, in order to understand the harm of it and transform it, we have to really begin to see it, and that part of seeing it is really seeing both sides of it. And so I hope this makes sense, and if not, I hope that you'll think about it more and maybe talk about it with others as well. But I also hope that understanding more about where the development of weight bias in our culture, that might help you as well. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that today. My purpose will be to provide you with kind of a big picture on the development of weight bias as it exists today, and then to use that perspective to help you see how it's possible to transform this, and what some of what is needed, some of the critical steps that are needed to transform this. So with that, I assume that if you're listening today, you're already aware that kids today are growing up in a very weight-biased culture, where they are bombarded literally daily with messages saying that they must compare their bodies, and that they must compare their bodies to various prescribed standards. So there are three, really, two main ones, but a third one too. They must compare their bodies to the thin ideal for appearance, to a normal body mass index or BMI for good health, and for a smaller number of kids, they get a lot of pressure to compare to the right body for a competitive sport or performance activity for those who participate in that. So we know, of course, right out of the chute that these standards are really not realistic or right for many kids, if not most of them. But pressures promoting this weight-focused approach to health and social well-being are just so universal. We really almost have to wonder how any child grows up today could have, avoiding feeling bad or at least feeling insecure, because first of all, those children who are larger, even if it's just by a small degree, if they still don't quote unquote make the grade, they learn to feel very early on that their bodies have already betrayed them. While even those who do meet the standard learn to worry that without enough vigilance, they too might fall from grace. So it's like it's never enough, like the drawing of this young gal. So we have to ask, how helpful is this for the health and well-being of our kids? Well, I don't think you'd be listening today if you weren't aware that it's not very helpful. That this approach does not really help kids to stay connected to their bodies and to be motivated to care for and take care of their bodies. Because it's hard to take care of something that we, are unsatisfied with or even feel has betrayed us, as I said. So this is really a critical question, I think. And to answer it, so asking, is a weight-focused approach to health effective? Health and well-being. Is it helping kids to stay connected to, care for, and take care of their bodies? Or, we might also say, well, is it not effective but maybe benign, or is it actually harmful? And then, of course, if so, is there a better way? I think it's really important, even though, many of us are pretty 100% clear on this history. I just think it's still important to always stop and step back and reflect a little bit historically. So I'm just going to take a few minutes actually, and do that. So just, we all know very, very well, beginning in the early 1960s, which is actually when I came of age, social pressures to conform to this thin body ideal, appeared almost overnight, and just, again, almost overnight, generated widespread body dissatisfaction and fear of fatness in girls and adult women. And almost overnight also, boom, dieting, which is restraining or restricting calories for the purpose of losing weight. That became a normal eating style for women and teenage girls by the 1980s. Similar pressures promoted the lean and buff ideal for men. And so, just as a summary, look at the change in a very, very short amount of time. And today, we hardly even question the fat talk and diet talk we hear around us. It's so common. It's like the air we breathe. It's like, for fish, the water we swim in. But keep in mind now that all through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s, this was all about appearance. But then in the 1990s, something new happened. And many of you know that that's when surveys began to report weight gain across the population, and along with that, an association between higher weights and health problems. And naturally, this caused a growing concern until in 1998, we had here in the United States our Surgeon General Koop giving his famous, now famous, War on Obesity speech. And some of you may remember Koop's announcement, but I'll bet even those of you who do, very few of you know that in the 4 years after his speech, we had another phenomenon, and that was that there was, during that period of time, a 1,000-fold increase in fear-based headlines about fatness. So not just comments about the increase in fatness, but really scary headlines comparing fatness, to terroristic attacks. Well, this just kind of broke the bank, if you will. So this in combination, we already had epidemic levels of fear of fatness for appearance sake, and now we have a 1,000-fold increase in fear-based headlines about the dangers of fatness. And what happened next was that in the next 10 years, the last decade really, we have seen a 66% rise in weight stigma. So suddenly double the pressure to fear fatness and to want to lose it. And the result is that today there's really just no one that's not touched by bias against and fear of fatness. And we can't really be surprised that ever younger children are affected as well, and that even very young children learn to believe that they too should do whatever they need to try to control the sizes and shapes of their bodies or to lose weight to meet that standard we talked about earlier. And those children who are, for whatever reason, chubbier or fatter, well, of course, at very early ages, many of them come to believe that the bias against them, those ugly bias words against them, are deserved. So, this is very troubling. And I don't think very many people would, say that this is an okay thing or feel very good about this. But, we also have this, this is just a slide I forgot was here, that by the time kids are in 6th grade, most of them relate to this young woman's statement. Actually, I felt pretty good about my body until 6th grade, but then everyone else hated theirs, so I thought I should too. So, so some people will say, well, yeah, that's too bad, but, we have these health concerns, and surely the risks of childhood obesity outweigh concerns about body image, dissatisfaction, and woes. But this really brings us back to our original question, which was, is it working? Is this standardized weight-focused approach to health and well-being helping people, motivating people to really take care of and care for their bodies in the ways that we would like to through, positive health-enhancing behaviors? So, the bottom line is that, of course, we know that it's not working. And if you talk to obesity prevention professionals, they will shake their head too and say, no, we've tried lots of things and we're still trying, but we haven't made a lot of progress. The thing is that, this is pretty well known, but the question is why? Why is it not working? Why do we keep beating our head against this wall and it's not working? And fortunately, what we have now is a really large and growing body of data that's helping us to understand this. It's really helping us to understand what professionals like myself who've worked, in the trenches with people struggling with weight-related issues and eating disorders for years have known, and that is that it turns out that worrying about weight and constantly trying to lose it is not only not the solution, it's actually part of the problem. So studies are showing that increasingly that the more body dissatisfaction we have, that this is inversely related to healthy behaviors and stable weight. So, this study by Diane Newmark-Steiner has a good summary statement. Body dissatisfaction does not serve as a motivator for engaging in health-enhancing behaviors. Rather, it predicts, the unhealthy behaviors that lead to poor and disordered eating, diminished health, and weight gain, not loss. So by the way, I just wanted to mention that a lot of my slides have quite a few words on them like this one, and I'm not going to go through all those words. I do hope that you may go back. This is additional research that I want to make available to people so that you can use it both in your own understanding of this, but also if you're speaking to other audiences that you have access to this. But so try not to worry when I come up with a slide like this one that has lots of words on it, but I only mention a few of them. So we know that body dissatisfaction is not helpful. It doesn't motivate healthy behaviors. What about weight stigma? We've seen a 66% rise in weight stigma in the past 10 years. Is that helping? Just the same thing. It turns out that when we internalize the weight bias against us, it actually is inversely related to healthy behaviors and stable weights also. It actually gets in the way of taking good care of ourselves. There's so much good information about the harm of weight stigma that really people need to become much, much, much more aware of. Because there's just nothing helpful about it. But the conclusion here is that really body dissatisfaction and weight stigma are not effective motivators. So some people think that they might be, but they're really just not. In fact, quite to the contrary. So, it's not helpful. So clearly, we need to pay attention to this. It's critical information. We have to. And if we do pay attention to it, what we realize is that most public health approaches today, weight-focused public health approaches, are asking the wrong question. Because by asking how can we prevent fatness or reduce or reverse obesity, we're really asking a stigmatizing question. You know, if we want to prevent something, then it must be pretty bad. And so it is what we call an iatrogenic question, which, by the way, I didn't know what iatrogenic meant for the first 40 years or so of my life, so don't feel bad if you're not familiar with that word. It just means that it's an approach that we use for prevention that actually ends up causing more problems. It actually adds to the problem. So that's what this conventional question does. And a colleague and a good friend of mine, Deb Burgard, says the result is that we prescribe for fat people what we diagnose as disordered and thin people. Well, fortunately, we had Einstein, who said, you can't solve problems with the same thinking that created them. So I love this quote because it's so relevant in this particular arena, because clearly we need a new question. We need a more effective, more pragmatic, helpful question. So how about this one that goes right to the heart of the matter, in my opinion? How about if we ask, regardless of size and shape, how can we teach children and adults too, of course, to care for instead of compare their bodies? How can we motivate them to respect, to tune into, to listen to, and to respond with what their bodies really need? So what we're really saying here is, what if we promote self-caring, health-enhancing behaviors for everyone the same, regardless of size, so that, you know, what our goal would be a well-fed, physically fit population of diverse-sized people. And isn't that what we really want? I mean, I don't know how anybody could argue that that isn't what we really want. And I want to be clear here, because sometimes people get nervous about this. This approach is not pro-fat. This is not an anti-thin approach. What it is it's just a weight-neutral approach. It just respects the fact that body size diversity is inevitable. Bodies are born to come in all different sizes and shapes, and that, as research increasingly shows, healthiest choices result when people respect and care for and accept their bodies, listen to them, and respond to what their bodies need. So I'd like to turn now to a model that has been developed for this purpose, the model for promoting health instead of size. This is the basis of the Healthy Bodies Teaching Kids What They Need to Know curriculum. Don't even bother to try to read all the words on this slide right now. We're going to go through it in some small kind of detail, but this is the overall view of the model, and I hope that you will come back to it and take a look at it, download the slides and look at it more carefully. Or if you want a colored copy of it, just email me and I'll send you a copy that you can download in color if you want. So this is the model that I want to talk about, and then also these are the building blocks for healthy body esteem. And what the building blocks are is all of the concepts that were in that first model that I just showed you are translated into child-friendly language, and that's really essentially what the building blocks are, so that it can help us to know the language that we can use with children to convey these same concepts. So where did the concepts in these models come from? Well, this model was developed in response to the identification of 4 faulty assumptions, false beliefs, or toxic cultural myths is what I like to call them, that are really arose out of conventional weight-focused approaches to health and weight. And when we hold up these 4 toxic myths to the light of day, when we expose them to the evidence that science has given us for several decades now, what we know is in fact true also feeds into the creation then of universal evidence-based health promotion principles that children really need to be taught, really not just children. The entire culture needs to be taught. But if we want to teach the next generation something different, then we need to first, of course, teach ourselves and then begin to teach children about these toxic myths and provide the antidotes with them and for them. And the antidotes are really, what's the truth, in relation to these myths? What's the true story? So I'm going to spend just a little bit of time now, and I'm going to go through these 4 toxic myths, and then we're going to kind of hold them up to the light of day, let science expose them for what they are, and then we're going to talk about, what is it that we can teach children and ourselves as well, because many of us are still struggling with this in order to find a better way. So the first myth, all these myths will be very familiar to you, by the way, because as I said earlier, I mean, they're really like the air we breathe, and we walk around with these myths bombarding us every single day. So it's not going to be anything new, but hopefully the result will be good new for you. The first one is based on just pressures to objectify and compare our bodies. And so this myth says meeting the prescribed standard for appearance and BMI should be everyone's goal. The right size, that's in quotes of course, the thin ideal and a normal BMI, these are proxies, which proxies means it's the same thing. It's what's necessary for acceptability and health. So there's a right size and everybody should have it. We already mentioned a little bit about media promotion of the thin ideal, which started in the 1960s, media images of, famous, beautiful people or a fashion, that sort of thing. Really were not using this kind of ideal prior to then. So it really was a shift and a change. And I think most adults today are pretty savvy about this. If you're not, I hope that you will learn something more about it. But of course, children growing up, even if you're very savvy about it and have learned about the creation of media images that really push an unrealistic thin ideal. Children are not familiar with that, and when they are hit with those same messages, they need a lot of instruction and a lot of help to understand that those are artificial creations and not really realistic for them to be comparing themselves to, and harmful in that way. But I think that very few people, even though we know about the appearance industry, very few adults, even in the field of adult, maybe especially in the field of adult, really question the messages that are too often delivered by obesity prevention campaigns and the effect that these may have, the harmful effect. I mean, I already said, just by the very words obesity prevention, I mean, if we're trying to prevent something, it must be pretty bad. And if we have a whole national campaign to prevent it, it must be really, really bad. But then we have also various creative, and I'm putting creative in quotes here a little bit, but I mean they are creative ways of trying to convey these messages to people that they should be very focused on obesity prevention. One of these campaigns that's actually been taken down, but it was in operation for several years by the U.S. government in the 2007, 2008, 2009 range, so not that long ago, maybe 5 years ago, the small step, take a small step to get healthy campaign. And really, I'm not going to go into too much detail. I had a video I would love to show you, but it doesn't really work in the webinar format to show a video, believe it or not. But really what this small step campaign does is it says, well, just take a few small steps, just take a walk on the beach, or just walk up a flight of stairs or two instead of taking the elevator, and you too can carve inches off your body. And this ad was so offensive to so many people. This whole campaign. This is just an example of a couple of the posters. There were many posters that you could get to supposedly I don't know, hang up in your locker room or your classroom, that really imply that if you just took a few, really, what's the message in this? The message is, having a thinner physique is not a complex thing. Just do a few small, simple things, and you too can achieve the standard you want. Which is really a very dangerous message that the government just didn't realize. It just really wasn't aware of how stigmatizing, how objectifying this is, dissecting bodies, showing just one body part and how we can just kind of carve inches away from it. But really also the most dangerous part of it, I think, is just the idea that through just a few simple steps, you too could, achieve the BMI that your doctor wants you to achieve. But, if you look at these are not even about health. These are entirely about appearance, and yet they're coming out of a health promotion campaign. So, really denying the complexity of weight, which we're going to talk about a little bit more. But, basically this campaign banner, Prevent Obesity, what they want people to do is, okay, eat well and stay active. But the underlying message is really eat well, but eat whatever it takes. Restrict your eating in whatever way it takes to prevent or obesity or fatness or reduce it. Stay active, but be sure you have to be as active, however active you have to be, is what's really called for. So the evidence, when we hold this up to the light of day and we look at studies that are really taking a look at what's helpful and what's harmful, the evidence is really showing that this kind of healthy weight intervention is not helping. It's very stigmatizing, that instead interventions should strive to enhance acceptance of size diversity, body satisfaction, and to avoid messages that are likely to increase body dissatisfaction and focus on weight loss as well. So, so that's what we know about that. Now, so this myth, the right size is essential for acceptability and health. One of the antidotes, when we hold things up to the light of day and we need to turn this around, there's 3 antidotes that are suggested by this model. And by the way, just a word about my slides with the antidotes on them, and there will be 4, one for each of the 4 toxic myths. The left-hand column with the words under the red word antidotes, these are the conceptual principles that are part of the model. And in the right are the body image, or the building blocks, so child-friendly language, if you will. So the antidotes for this, the first one is, it's really helpful, I think, for people to have some historical perspective on today's dichotomous and stigmatizing body image and weight-related attitudes. That's where I started with you. Now, maybe you don't feel like you need that history because you already know it, but not everybody knows it. And I think that it's really important for children and adults to be able to say, it wasn't always this way. And what happened that, we began to develop these attitudes and ideas and ways of thinking, and is it helpful? So the building block for this is that people become unhappy trying to control things that are not in their power to control. And as for looks, we need to make the most of who we were born to be. So this is based, the building blocks are kind of like the moral of the lesson in the Healthy Bodies curriculum. So it's a story that the kids read and discuss, and then this is kind of the moral of the story. So the second antidote for this myth is we really need to teach media literacy and critical thinking about messages that promote the right size, wrong size mentality. So, anytime we have a standard and, that you have to meet that standard to be acceptable or to be healthy, then that's a right size, wrong size mentality. So, so media literacy, being able to understand both the appearance industry, but also the health industry sends messages that are not helpful. The building block for this is hardly anyone looks as perfect as the models and advertisements, and not everyone can have a slim body. I will be careful not to compare myself or others to them. And the third antidote is that we really need to actively promote an identity that's based on substance rather than packaging. And all too often right now, it's the other way around. So that we want to promote that who I am is valued over how I look. And you know, the building block for this then is that the way we look is only one part of us. It is a part of us. It doesn't mean that it doesn't matter at all. But we really need to pay equal attention or more attention to all the many parts of who we are. So, so that's that myth. The second one really flows out of the first, and you'll see all these myths flow one to the next. If we're going to have the belief that there's a right size to be, you know, and a normal BMI that should be normal for everyone, then we have to have denial of biological diversity. So this myth says anyone can be slim if he or she works at it. Fatter people eat too much or are inactive, and fatness is just bad or wrong. So, you know, as a culture, we have been taught to believe that if people are large, they are overweight. And in fact, that's the definition in our BMI categorizations. That's our gold standard, if you will. If your BMI is over 20, is 25 or above, then you're over the weight that you should be. That's the message that's inherent in that. And I have to say, this is despite the fact that there's really quite a lot of evidence anymore really showing what this statement, that, believe it or not, this is from 2000, the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports said, which is that active obese individuals actually have a lower morbidity and mortality rate than normal weight individuals who are sedentary. The health risks of obesity are largely controlled if a person is physically active and physically fit. Well, how often do you actually hear that statement when somebody go to the doctor or somebody's talking about BMI and those BMI categories? And, you know, if you're in the overweight, wouldn't you think they would rename that category? It's just so condemning and damning just by its very name. In any case, weight stigma is really highly associated with the belief, the widespread belief in this myth, that weight is your personal responsibility. Every person has a personal responsibility for achieving the right weight, a normal BMI, or a relatively lean or slim physique. You know, and this leads to a lot of assumptions that arise from this about what bodies are right and what bodies are wrong. And this is true despite the fact that we've known for well more than 2 decades that the primary influence, somewhere, you know, it varies, but somewhere between 64 and 84% of the influence for body size and shape is genetic. And there's just so much research about this. I've just show you a few of the studies here in case you want to take a look at them. But, you know, a lot of people at this point will say, well, yeah, but Kathy, are you saying that, you know, we have had an increase in rates of fatness across the population? You're not saying that that is a result of a change in our genetic predisposition, are you? Well, of course I'm not. I mean, that's not what the point is. But here's what my point is. This is what I'm saying. And that is that even if everyone across the population, even if everyone's lifestyle habits were absolutely pristine, people would still come in all sizes and shapes, ranging from fat to thin. So it's just completely biased, inappropriate, stigmatizing, and harmful to make assumptions about a person's lifestyle habits or their health status based on their appearance or their BMI ever. So, and yet we do it all the time. People do it all the time. I love this image, which is from a wonderful website called danceswithfat.org. Please take a look at it if you care to. But you know, this is a good visualization of what I just said, I think. One other thing that I wanted to mention here is that not only genetics, of course, but we now have a lot of information about how important it is to look upstream at other factors that are known to, they're clearly documented to contribute to weight. And so I'm not going to talk about these, but just again, so many complex contributors to weight that we can hardly begin to even keep them all in mind. So this myth that says essentially flat out, fat is bad, anyone can be slim if they just work at it. There's 3 antidotes. Basic human biology makes up the groundwork for all of these antidotes. The first one, we need to understand ourselves and teach children to respect the facts of genetic diversity and the complex contributors to size and shape. So the building block for the children that we would want them to take away from this is to understand that most of the way we look is determined before we're even born. Taller, shorter, fatter, thin, all are normal, all built in. The second one is to help children to understand the normal changes in body fat composition that occur during developmental stages. For them, of course, puberty is key. There are other developmental stages that affect adults, like menopause, but we're talking about children here. So, bodies grow very different ways during puberty, and how often is that misconstrued when kids start putting on that little layer of subcutaneous fat under the surface of their skin? How often is that misconstrued as, you're getting a little fat, better be careful, and there are the seeds right there for being afraid. So the building block is we want children to understand that there are many different normal ways for bodies to change in puberty, and sooner or later most boys and girls will gain weight and fill out. The third one, antidote, is to recognize that there are limits to external controls over weight through healthy means. The internal weight regulatory system includes so many complex factors that are not in our power to choose. So, yes, people can force their weights up or down. We can do that, but don't we only want children to use healthy means? So the key words here are through healthy means. And so then the takeaway for children is for them to understand that each person's body works uniquely to grow and maintain a weight that is right for him or her. Okay, the third myth that we want to mention now is really denial of the reliable, predictable results of dieting. So if we believe that anyone can be slim if they work at it, then we have to have a way for them to achieve that, and so we have dieting. Is really people think diet and exercise, but dieting is really the kingpin here. People believe dieting is an effective weight loss strategy, even though we have known for a long time, and it's really not arguable. If you read articles or studies that try to argue that dieting is an effective weight loss strategy, you read through that and see if their outcomes went any further than a year or two at most. Because after 3 to 5 years, up to 95% that is lost through dieting, weight that's lost through dieting, is regained. And between half to 2/3 of dieters regain more weight than they lose, so therefore contributing to rising rates of fatness across the culture. So this is just very important information that, frankly, dieting is still a normative eating style most people are not aware of. And children, here's just one other thing I'll point out. Children whose parents encouraged them to diet were at nearly twice the odds of being overweight 5 years later than non-dieters. And these associations were not due to the dieters being heavier to begin with. So, so we continue to diet. The National Institute of Health and Medical Education continues to teach that weight loss through dieting is recommended for persons who have a BMI in the overweight or obese range, even though they, in their own literature, this is from the NIH clinical guidelines on the treatment of overweight and obesity in adults, even though they have to admit that evidence suggests that over 80% of persons who lose weight with a low-calorie diet, that's LCD, will gradually regain it. So, what other prescription would a physician ever give that had an 80% failure rate with all the negative side effects? Plus, not only is it not effective to lose weight, but the chances of regaining more weight than the person lost is very, very significant. So we continue to diet. This is just kind of a funny representation that often doesn't get asked in relation to, yes, we can all lose weight on a diet, but what comes after the after? And so, we continue to diet, but it's not effective. And, so we have to better understand why it's not effective. One of the things, and I won't have any time to do it today in this webinar, but one of the things that we have enjoyed is coming up with fun ways to teach this to children. And so in the Healthy Bodies curriculum, for example, the kids consider what happens if they don't get enough sleep, if their sleep hours are restricted or restrained. If they don't get enough water to drink, what symptoms occur? And then they go on an air diet where they have to breathe through a drinking straw and they don't get enough air to breathe. And in all of these cases, when they look at the things that are vital to keep us alive, they learn that when those things are artificially restricted or restrained, the end result is really what Ancel Keys discovered in 1950 through his very famous, worldwide famous study and huge 2-volume book on the biology of human starvation. And what Keys learned through that is that through watching his subjects in their usual habits of eating for 3 months, and then they went on a diet. They were put on a diet for 6 months, and they had about half of their usual intake, which, by the way, was about 1,500 calories. So, this is called the starvation diets, but 1,500 calories, anybody who's ever gone on a diet would probably not think of that as a starvation level diet. But, what he learned was that when people were restricting their eating, well, guess what? These are the things that happen. Increased obsessive thoughts about food, difficulty concentrating on anything other than just thinking about food, wanting food, dramatic increase in mood disorders, irritability, depression, anxiety. And then he gave those same people and followed them for an additional 3 months after they were allowed to go back to whatever usual eating habits that they wanted to. And again, the universal observations across the board were that all of those people who had been in that restrictive eating pattern became compulsive and binge eaters. The amounts they consumed were way higher than that in the pre-restriction phase, and it continued for up to 5 months. I don't know if he followed them longer than 5 months or if that's all the longer he followed them. But then, of course, there was weight gain, rapid weight gain, and that the weight gain was not just to where they'd started, but actually above, and increased obsession with food throughout the whole follow-up period. So, dieting is not benign. Not only is it not effective, it's actually very, very dangerous and leads to disordered eating patterns in very many people, if not an eating disorder, then disordered eating patterns. Because, of course, what do we do after we regain the weight? Well, then we go back on our next diet again. So we perpetuate that over and over again. So, we really want to teach children and ensure that they understand not only just to hear that dieting is not a good idea, but why, to really get it experientially, and that it actually can cause more problems over the long haul. So the building block is obvious. Weight loss diets are not a good idea. We can hold back our hunger for a while, but we can expect to eat more to make up for it in the end. So I just want to say one other thing about dieting before we move to our last myth, and that is that there's another problem with a message. Sometimes people have gotten the message that dieting is not a good thing, but then they're kind of changing that into a message that says, well, if you just have healthy eating and physical activity habits, then you can achieve the weight loss you want, or the size and shape you want, or a normal BMI, or a thin physique. But as we said earlier, even if people are doing all the right things, they're still going to come in all shapes and sizes. So messages that suggest weight loss or a normal BMI will be the reward for a healthy lifestyle has really become an unintended but a very common prescription for complacency about healthy eating choices like these. Why should I eat healthy if it doesn't make me thin, said a 14-year-old girl. Or this one, I exercised 5 times a week for 3 months and I didn't lose any weight. What's the point? What's the point in exercising if you don't lose weight? Or this one, which we don't talk about very much and really should. I eat junk food all the time and I never exercise. What difference does it make? I'm not fat. So what this young man is really saying is, I enjoy thin privilege. People think I have the right size body and shape. So what difference does it make, how I take care of my body? So this kind of complacency, which is very alarming, I think, really fuels the final myth, which is really about discounting the value of health in its own right. So this myth says, eat, drink, and be merry. Healthy habits for health's sake are just too much work. It's just not worth it. So, the number one reason why people say that they would engage in eating well and being more physically active is that they want to lose weight. And so if they do that, what we get too often is, I did all this and all I get was health. That's ludicrous, of course. And even people who would say that would know that it was ludicrous. But at the same time, you know as well as I do that that's where a lot of people live. I did all this and all I get is health. Because we have this kind of all or nothing worldview where if we're not eating in hopes of manipulating our size, we're saying, forget it. This is too hard. I need a break. And what do we do when we need a break in today's world? Well, we have a whole host of readily available, incredibly cheap, highly processed, flavor enhanced, party in your mouth, entertainment foods. Michael Pollan calls them food-like substances, to choose from. And along with this, an unlimited supply of sedentary diversions and distractions causing to us. So I don't think it's an accident that poor eating and overly sedentary ways have become the norm in our culture very often. Because if you put together our conventional weight-focused approach to health and well-being with our very challenging food environment, which I'm not talking about today, but that's another problem, then I think that higher rates of fatness can only be expected. I mean, what else would you expect? So I think this is largely a result of what we have come to value. And what we value is, on the one hand, meeting prescribed standards for the right size, shape, and weight, or if we don't get this prize, then we want our consolation prize. We want our entertainment foods and our sedentary diversions. So what are the antidotes for this myth? Well, overall, in a nutshell, is that we really need to shift the focus to value health instead of size, which is exactly upside down from where we are. It's a total flip side of the coin from the focus on size, even at the expense of whatever it takes to achieve the right size, even if those means are not healthy. And if we adopt valuing health instead of size, then the antidotes are not rocket science. I'm not saying they're easy. There are all kinds of reasons why it may be difficult for people to eat well and get enough physical activity, ranging from, financial reasons to not, to raising a family and having difficulty having time to make, good meals, and food deserts, and, just lots of reasons why these are not easy, but they're not complicated either. I mean, it's not rocket science, and that is that we really need to help people to understand that the most important thing they can do is to stay connected to and care for our bodies with mindful eating. Satisfy our hunger completely with a variety of wholesome, good-tasting foods at regular intervals, and enjoy some entertainment foods, knowing that your nutritional needs are met. So take care of what your body needs. Make sure you're doing that, and then have a cookie. Which is really, if you think about it, not that different than how we teach our children other skills. We say, practice the piano or your instrument, and then go out and play. Or do your homework, and then you can watch your show. So we, take care of what's, really vital, and then just have some enjoyment, have some entertainment, have some fun. Life is not all, just paying attention to, taking care of business. The second one is very similar. Enjoy regular physical activity. Care for your body with enough embodied movement. I want to just linger on the word embodied movement because I think it's really, really important that we understand that not everybody wants to move in the same way. And so just thinking that everybody should go to the gym, or that, you know, everybody should run around the gym, around the football field at school, and enjoy that, and then keep it up as a way to keep themselves physically fit and active. It's just not going to fly. So helping kids to really learn what their form of embodied movement is really what's needed. So we need to engage in enough embodied movement to maintain strength and endurance throughout our lifetime, and again, enjoy sedentary entertainment, knowing our activity needs are met. The third one is to accept the size and shape that results from good self-care. So if we're eating well and we're enjoying physical activity on a regular basis, we're doing what we can to take care of ourselves. You know, we might add in there managing stress is important too. You know, then this is the size and shape that's right for this student, this child, this person. And then what we want to do is just help people to choose role models that support who they are. I didn't go through the building blocks here. I forgot, sorry. You can read them yourself. Really, they're not rocket science, as I said. You know, the last one is perhaps the most inspiring, I think. One, choose role models that you admire for things deep inside and who make you feel good about who you are. And so one of the things that we do with the children in that regard is that we have them, you know, reread the story of the Ugly Duckling, or read it if they haven't read it before, you know, and then have a discussion about the question, what if the swan had stayed with the ducks? Because isn't that what so many children find themselves having to do? You know, they're in a position where day after day, year after year, they are feeling pressured by the messages and the people around them to compare themselves against standards that were never right for them in the first place, and feeling ugly as a result. And, you know, if the swan had stayed with the ducks, it would have been a miserable existence. And if we allow our children to continue to have to grow up without being given different messages about their diverse body sizes and shapes and how to care for and take care of and stay connected to those bodies, you know, they're going to grow up feeling the same way. So, you know, what role models will help our children? What standards, if you will help our children to want to care for and take care of their bodies? You know, standards representing all different sizes and shapes of healthy people. So, you know, at the end of the day, what we're really talking about here is getting rid of the campaign banner to prevent obesity and replacing it with one that really urges everyone the same to care for and take care of their body.